biggest recruiting busts. We talk about them today at the Voice of College Football, also Michigan football at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for joining us. I am one of our post-game hosts, Desmond. I am here with my partner, Dre, and also Mark Rogers is with us as well. Before we get into it, please like and subscribe. Share the videos out on social media. It definitely helps the channel. We are doing our best to get the Michigan football at the Voice of College Football, the #1 team on the Mark Rogers TV. So please help us out. We'd greatly appreciate it. Mark, how we doing today?
You got some lofty goals there, Desmond.
Shoot for
Gotta shoot
stars.
high. Gotta shoot high. Michigan has a big enough fan base. We could definitely do this. We could do it.
Okay, I would love to see it. Again, I would kind of love to see it. Man,
Yeah,
we got a stranger
kinda.
with us today.
We do. Special guest with us. If you've been tuning in every week, we have been missing one of our crucial parts of the show, Dre. It is good to have you back, my friend. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's wonderful to be back. Um, Definitely miss talking to you guys and definitely to our subscribers. I really missed it. Reason I've been gone is for a good reason. Wife and I welcomed our first addition to our family, our first child. Um, so I've been adjusting to fatherhood. So, but it's like football. It's a collective effort, a lot of teamwork, definitely a lot of practice. And you know what? I gotta be honest, you're learning a lot on the fly. So it's been my most rewarding and tiring job of my life, I would say. So, and I'm only at the beginning. So, looking forward to the milestones and steps ahead.
Nice, man. Well, congratulations. We're really excited for you, man, and I think our viewers have missed you. So I'm sure they're glad to
Miss
have you
them.
back, just like we are
Mutual,
too.
mutual.
Well, you came back with gangbusters. You sent me a text, I think on Monday or Tuesday,
Hmm.
that you are back, and you came ready to roll with a topic as well. So the recruiting bus that we are talking about is the last, I believe, 20 years was your parameters, 10 to 20 years, something in that range. So our original plan was to each do 10. I think we ended up breaking it down where we each have five. I have
Right,
five and you have five, Dre. And
right.
we definitely want Mark's perspective on it as well. So yeah, I mean we can just kind of dive right into it. Dre, who is your first mention as one of Michigan's in the recent recruiting bus?
Right. And before I start, I just want to give a little bit more of a I want everybody to know a little bit more of my thought process, what I view as a recruiting bust. That doesn't mean that a player was a total failure, like they didn't touch the field all the time, or they didn't have moments. It means based on the expectations coming in, the amount of schools that wanted them besides the University of Michigan, um, how that weighed versus what actually happened. Right. So don't be surprised if we say a player and you're like, hold on, that guy played. Oh, I remember he had this moment here, or he played well for a couple games, or this season. It's about expectations versus reality. Right. So the first one I have is Sugar Shane Morris out of Warren De La Salle. I
Mm.
remember for years hearing about this left-handed quarterback, special, prototypical pocket kid, can make all the throws. Big time quarterback being recruited to the University of Michigan, and he never panned out. Took him a while to hit the field, and the times he did hit the field, he was shaky at times. I think we all remember where one of Brady Hoke's biggest embarrassments on national TV was the way he handled the Shane Morris concussion.
Hmm.
And we all remember Shane stumbling, on the field. And it was a very, very concerning look. And the kid just never really bounced back from that. He never really found it, and lived up to the expectations. He ends up being a grad transfer at Central Michigan University, my alma mater. And he actually does decent for them. But he's no longer playing football, it looks like, and he never quite panned out. Based on the expectations coming in.
Yeah, I think that's a fair one. I think everybody remembers, when Shane Morris was on campus and that he was going to be a big deal. So I definitely agree with that one. Mark, did you have any thoughts on the Shane Morris
Yeah, so a lot
time?
of things came to mind when Dre threw out Shane Morris. I didn't know it was Sugar Shane Morris. I was unaware of that little
That
nickname
that
from
wasn't
back
his
in the
official
day.
nickname. That was just some people made. That was something me and Dez would kind of
Okay,
do and
okay.
stuff like that. But no, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for him that what he's remembered for is, yeah, that the hit against Minnesota, the whole incident on the field that shouldn't have resulted, and obviously he was just a figure in the confusion there. But to Dre's point, looking at his numbers here, he never. Oh man, because besides that moment, what came to mind was him playing in a bowl game against Kansas State, and
Buffalo Wild
Michigan
Wings Bowl,
lost.
right?
What's
Buffalo
that?
Wild Wings Bowl. It was the Buffalo
Yes,
Wild Wings Bowl.
and I believe the score was
Exciting.
31-14. I'm looking at his career numbers. I would have guessed that he threw touchdown passes at Michigan. He never threw a touchdown pass at Michigan. No TDs, 5 picks in his career at
Mm,
Michigan.
sizzling,
Yikes. That's
sizzling.
rough. It's pretty
Look,
rough.
it doesn't help. And Malachi, I hope I said that word right. We are getting to that guy. Don't you worry about that. That guy is definitely on my list. So don't you worry about that. And this is not ranked, okay? For me, I'm just
Oh
going to
man,
give him one my five.
that
So,
I just took a look at the chat there. Oh man,
oh yeah, we're
the
getting
the,
to
Okay.
the
him.
people
Oh
the
yeah.
people are dialed in with us. They're
Yeah,
dialed in.
we're getting on it. We're getting to that one.
And
No,
before we either move on or bury Shane Morris in the conversation, I don't want to,
Yeah, let's not bury
not
him.
use my words in a certain way. But to Dre's point, let's look at the bright side. Yeah, Central Michigan is a senior, 3,200 yards, 27 TDs, 17 picks, had a nice season to finish out his collegiate career.
yeah.
Well, my guy is a bit of the same light, but just didn't finish out his college career well. The first person I went with was Dylan McCaffrey. Coming in, had a lot of hype going on. And the thing that I remember, and Dre, I'm not sure if you remember this, but I remember seeing a high school highlight from Dylan McCaffrey when he was coming to Michigan and committed. And I remember vividly calling you, Dre, and just saying, I mean, I saw him throw like a 10-yard stop route, something like that. But when the ball came out, it just didn't look like what I would assume a high level Big Ten quarterback would look like. I'm like, it looked, I mean, it looked like it was a noodle arm and super random, but Stevie Threet was a quarterback who was from
Ooh,
actually the
throwback.
the city that I actually live in now, but he went to Arizona State. He had some concussion issues, things like that. But when I was in college, he was in high school, and with just being local, went to watch him. Yeah, I think maybe once or twice, but watching that guy throw the ball, I'm like, it was clear this guy is a Division 1 high level quarterback. Like you could see, I mean, he almost threw the ball too hard. Like his receivers had difficulty catching it because he threw the ball so hard. Like to me, it was clear. And seeing that clip of Dylan, even before he even suited up, it just was odd to me because number one, the why would you use a clip where he doesn't look his absolute best and he doesn't look impressive? So it was just odd to me, and it was one of those things where it was just one 6-7 second clip, and they just would keep looping it, but just never. I didn't see it. I know he had some limited time, and he also had some injuries, concussion. I know a lot of people probably remember, I think it was against Wisconsin where he had a pretty serious concussion and there was a lot of talk about that potentially hit being dirty, so on and so forth. So I think for him it was a little bit a bit unfair on my part, but nonetheless, even the times where he was healthy, like I never got the vibe that he was going to be that guy that a lot of people talked about of taking Michigan to the next level. And he ended up, transferring. I think he went to Northern Colorado. And even
with
there, I
that.
mean, he really didn't do much at all this past season. Had 264 pass attempts, 1,300 yards, 5 touchdowns, 7 picks. So it just, for me, I just didn't. I just remember seeing that from the beginning. That first clip that I saw, like, this doesn't look like a special arm. This doesn't look like a guy who's gonna come in and just throw the ball past 5-star defensive backs and thread the needle on some high level defenses. So yeah, Dylan McCaffrey was the first person on my list. So Dre, what are your thoughts?
You know, speaking of the Wisconsin game, that's where Michigan quarterbacks go to die. Like that's where we just tend. Like I swear, it was like 3 years in a row. We had Brandon Peters get pinned in half, and then we had the following year we had Dylan McCaffrey. I'm like, guys, just slide. Please stop running when we go at Wisconsin because it just never turns out well. So that's why I'm like, hey, Cade, no running. Both you and JJ chill out. Anytime we go to Wisconsin, it never turns out good. That's just put that disclaimer out there. Yeah, no, you did do that, Des. You did call me right away. You said, "Hey, man, this guy's small. He doesn't like he has a special arm. I don't see it." And I think I always go back to the size thing. One thing I can never understand is like with his frame, 6'5" kid, very tall kid. He is athletic. Like I definitely saw there were flashes. You saw, that he is very athletic family, obviously. That he could run well. But I'm like, how can he not put on any weight? I mean, you look at his brother Christian. A built 5'11", 6-foot running back. So I know he can do it, right? And it's like, well, I mean, you can't play in the Big Ten and have a small frame at quarterback. You won't last. You won't last. It's a very, very physical conference, and especially with the way that Harbaugh likes to play, I was very shocked where you don't really expect a true freshman to come in extremely built, especially at the quarterback position, but you would expect by their second or third year on campus to see, especially in the lower half, like them start to gain weight, and he never really did. It was so weird to me. So it wasn't surprising that he started having injury issues, and a lot of times, especially at the quarterback position, it's not always talent why they don't pan out. A lot of times it's situation, it's coaching. Because once a kid loses his confidence, and one of the guys on my list, I think definitely falls into this category. Once they lose their confidence, it's hard for them to get it back. It's hard, and you need if there's any position that you need to have confidence and understand timing and rhythm, it's the quarterback position. So I just feel like he never quite got his body where it needed to be. He never quite, built his confidence where it needed to be, and it didn't pan out. And someone put a comment that I agree with. Like maybe Harbaugh and his staff should have recognized early that even though he's a talented player or talented athlete, maybe his future wasn't best at quarterback. Maybe they should have transitioned him to receiver. That's where his dad plays. His older brother Max, I believe, played receiver at Duke. So, and I think there's another brother that played at Nebraska and transferred, but I think he plays quarterback as well.
Yep.
Look, it's unfortunate. I thought I really did when he transferred to North Dakota State, whatever it's called, North Colorado State or whatever. I think his father is a coach there. I really thought, like, okay, if there's any place that you should shine, it should be at a smaller school and playing for your dad. But I was shocked. I definitely checked his stats at the end of that year to see how he did, and I'm like, man, so
Not great.
yeah,
Not anything to write home about.
No,
Nothing
so
to write
yeah,
home about.
he was definitely underwhelming. I'll say a bust compared to expectations.
Mark, what are your thoughts on old Dylan McCaffrey?
My thoughts are pretty brief. I can't say I remember a whole lot about Dylan McCaffrey. What I remember is a whole lot of talk about him.
Oh yeah,
But I don't remember a whole lot about him. But yeah, he was much like Shane Morris. Now, Dylan McCaffrey just dug up the numbers. We'll give him 3 more touchdown passes than Shane Morris and never threw a pick, at least in 35 attempts. But probably a lot of mop up against some inferior foes. So Let's not get too crazy over his numbers. But so Morris was the third-rated quarterback in the country coming out of high school. McCaffrey was number 5. So they were both top 5 quarterbacks. And Shane Morris was a top 70 player. McCaffrey wasn't far behind, top 123 in his class. So they were both supposed to do something, and it just didn't happen.
All right, Dre, who you got next on your list?
Yeah. Mike 383, thank you. This is a fun topic. We appreciate it. I thought, it would be a good way to get people engaged. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. Next is we thought, oh my God, we got God coming in at running back. Oh,
Greene goes blue. I already know it's coming.
That
hashtag was trending.
Yes,
it was trending.
I was on YouTube looking at, typing in this kid. I'm looking at his highlights. Oh, he's a man amongst boys. This running guy's over. Derek Greene, running back, and I believe out of Texas, 5-star running back out of Texas.
Yes,
wanted by everyone across the country, and
any and everybody. Yes,
the University of Michigan got this kid. Oh, you would have thought that we were getting Walter
Payton, Herschel Walker. Mix them all together. They all had a child, and it was Derek Greene.
Yes, the chosen.
Greene goes blue. I'll never forget that hashtag was trending. Hashtag Greene goes blue. I'll never forget that.
My goodness, he got to campus, didn't play, got incredibly overweight, and I'm like, and what was telling is that it's like, okay. I tried to rationalize in my brain, and I think the Michigan coaching staff did as well. Okay, how can we salvage this kid? He doesn't have the body type to be a cowbell or to be someone that could be our future back, but maybe he can use his strength, his size, and power to be a short yardage guy. And I never forget that they would put him in on short yardage situations, and he was getting put on his butt. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, oh my God. It was a total flame out. I was so disappointed. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that he ended up transferring to TCU or going to TCU. Don't think he did anything there. Derek Greene is one of the biggest busts in Michigan recruiting history. Oh, it was hurtful. So hurtful.
He's high up there. Like I said, I will never forget the Greene goes blue hashtag, and it was odd. Like the freshman year, a lot of times you can understand that, right? Playing running back, it's difficult, because in high school, when you're that high level of a player, you're not all the time asked to do everything a running back should, right? It's hey, we've got this guy, he's better than everybody else. We're not going to ask him to pass block. We're either going to hand him the ball or we're going to throw it to him. So he doesn't need to pass block. He doesn't need to understand pass protection. None of that. We give him the ball, or we swing him out and we throw him the ball. That's what we do. So you can understand that moving up to, the college level, obviously a big time program, that a lot of times picking up those types of things can be difficult for a player. You see it a lot, and more so going from college to pro, but nonetheless, it's the same thing. Understanding football at a bigger scope than just what I do as a running back, knowing everybody's job and what's going on in the play. So you can understand that freshman year, but after that, that sophomore year, you started to think like, okay, well, he's at least gonna split time, right? And it just never panned out. It never happened. And the funniest part was, I believe I'm correct, Derrick Henry came out in that very same class. So it's tough to look at, Derek Greene, who I'm pretty sure was rated above Derrick Henry. You look at a guy where you say, man, one guy, by the time he was done, is a 2,000-yard rusher, Heisman Trophy, national champion, and another guy, basically never touched the field. So it's quite the contrast.
He ate his way off the field. I'm sorry, man.
It just was. That was so man.
That's hard. It's one thing when a kid, has injuries. You can't really control that, right? That sometimes that happens. Kids are highly. Brant Newsome was who's the current tight ends coach for Michigan. 4-star tackle, like he ends up, having to medically retire from the game. Like those things happen. So, but when a kid, has high talent, especially at a skill position, and does not do the right things. I'm sorry, you can't tell me he was doing the right things and he's gaining weight playing running back. You know, it's very, very disheartening, and it's very frustrating. So yeah, Derek Greene will live on in Michigan folklore in terms of recruiting forever. Absolutely.
Man, you guys are bringing up good memory. I mean, you guys are bringing up memories of Michigan football. Some of
I
these
bet.
names, my goodness, yeah, I haven't thought about for years. Derek Greene. So, yeah, you guys are doing a phenomenal job of just painting a picture of some of these guys. And yeah, boy, he was supposed to be big time. I'm looking at his numbers here, and he had 2 big games in his career, not against anybody good, but that's another thing. You bring up numbers for a guy that played like at Michigan. If he had a little bit of playing time and compiled a few numbers, but you got to go to the opponent. So as soon as Dre was talking about, man, getting thrown down for 2-yard losses and just not being able to move the chains or do anything, I go straight to his first year. He came out, probably people got excited. Central Michigan, 11 carries, 58 yards, his very first game in college. Then next week against Notre Dame, he got 1 carry, 1-yard loss. A couple of weeks later, 3 carries against Penn State, gained a yard on 3 carries. Then against Nebraska, he had 8 carries for 11 yards. So a lot of 1-yarders there. And, he had a big day against App State the next year for $170 and a touchdown and 15 carries. But yeah, against all the good teams, it was a rough go. It was a rough go for Derek Greene. Wow.
It was like he
Green
like
goes
blew a
blue.
tire. It's like the moment he made contact, he blew a tire and it just like collapsed. Like I was like, what is going
Wow.
on, man? Like this kid's like 5'10", 5'11", 225 pounds. I mean, he's huge, built, solid, right? From the ground up. So you think, oh, when he touches the football, he's not gonna go down on the first hit, right? At least he should fall forward. I can't tell you how many times I saw that kid get hit on contact by safeties. Right, and he is falling flat like he had a flat tire. Oh my goodness,
Man, every time you guys size it up and I look at the numbers, it just like fits perfectly. You talk about, I think I would have a chance to fall forward on this.
Yes.
The very last carry of his career. Then this is just poetic. Just a 5-yard loss.
There we go.
It's tough to lose 5 yards on a running play.
It is.
Yeah,
It's very difficult. But if anyone can do it, it's Derek Greene. He can do it.
Yeah.
Wow.
It couldn't have been with his speed. He definitely wasn't trying to stretch a play. Sometimes running backs lose plays, lose yards because they're trying to do a little bit too much dance in the backfield. He was not a dancer. So, I'm sure it was not that. He only can do one thing, north to south,
And he didn't do that all that well.
And he didn't do that well at all. Just saying.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, you're next. I'm sorry.
My next one, I'm switching my order because I believe Mike 38 had mentioned it. 3883. Sorry. My next one is that I'm going with is Shea Patterson, and I know people will think that it's a little crazy considering he threw for over 2,500 yards both seasons. But the thing is Shea Patterson was brought here to win a national championship and at minimum to win the Big Ten. Like that was the reason he was here. He was, the Ole Miss situation happened and he was, available to transfer and was eligible right away after some litigation, I guess. So when he came here, I mean, it was a big deal. I'm not sure I would say it was as big as Derek Greene, but it was a very big deal when it comes to the scope of college football because we had just seen what Shea had done at Ole Miss as a really young player, but just the ability to push the ball down the field, strong arm, was able to make plays even with his feet. And coming to Michigan, the thought was you've got a 5-star quarterback, which Jim Harbaugh, at that time had seemed to have a difficult time getting those guys. So you have one who is, I would say people would have called him Shea Patterson proven at that point. Teamed up with Jim Harbaugh, who is the quarterback whisperer. Like, this is a match made in heaven. Who knows what Michigan's going to be able to do? And the thing that I look at are just the big games with Shea Patterson. I took some just quick notes. 2018, his first game, played Notre Dame. He was 20 for 30, 227 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Not awful, but you'd love to see a little bit more. You've got Ohio State that year, 20 for 34, 187 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. The 3 touchdowns, 1 pick sounds great, but 187 yards on 20 completions that's kind of difficult to do. And then in the bowl game against Florida, he's 22 for 36, 236 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. In 2019, he had some really, really rough games. Wisconsin was 14 to 32, 219, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Penn State, 24 for 41, 276, 0 touchdowns, 1 pick. Ohio State, he was 18 for 43 for 305, 1 touchdown, and 1 pick. And the bowl game against Alabama, 17 for 37, 233 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. I mean, you bring in high-level guys to play well in those big games, in the games that you need them. Like, you want to see the high quality or the highly rated guys. You want to see them perform well, and that's the whole point of getting them. Number one is that you lean on them in those difficult situations, and I think some of it can be blamed on Jim Harbaugh, because I think that at that time the offense was still really conservative. But the difficult part is the times when Shea threw the ball more, he performed even worse. So, like, it was almost one of those things where you had to keep him kind of in the middle, because if you went too much, his performance went down. So he was one I put just because, I mean, it's rare that you get a proven guy that comes into the program at that time. And it just, the expectations, I think it goes back to kind of what you mentioned at the beginning, Dre, was the expectations of these guys. It was expected that Shea was going to come in and light up Ohio State and light up Michigan State and beat Notre Dame and all these things. In the first game, I mean, they lost the first game that he started. Now, you can't put all of that on him, but if you were to ask Shea Patterson, he probably doesn't think he played all that well in that game, and I would probably agree. So Shea is my second person on the list.
His swag is fantastic, though.
Say it again.
His dressing swag was fantastic. I mean, dude, at the Penn State 2018 Penn State game at Penn State, or 19, I think it was 18. He has on the all white Michigan uniform. He has the visor. I think he has the all white gloves. Oh, they were sweet. And he's spatted with white tape. Oh, he looks sweet, man. Didn't play that great, but no, Shea's I think Shea fits this list. Shea, like he played, like you say, as a true freshman at Ole Miss, he played really well. I remember Harbaugh getting on the plane, getting on the jet, flying down there to talk to him, to sell him on the idea of coming to Michigan. And when they got him, it was like, there's distinctly, I remember us being at work talking about how big this was. And because it wasn't like a true freshman kid coming in who was inexperienced and you didn't know. No, this kid was on the field studied. We saw that he was highly recruited coming in, and he actually can play. And you felt like we knew what we were getting. Like, okay, no, we know exactly what we're getting. This kid has it. He has the talent. Harbaugh finally got his quarterback. That was the thing. Harbaugh finally has his quarterback. He shouldn't have any other excuses. And it just never quite panned out. And, like I said, when things start to go wrong for a quarterback, it's rare that they find themselves again. He's gone on to, not make it. I think he was undrafted free agent with the Chiefs. Barely was able to sit on their practice squad. Now he was ended up being the first.
He was the number 1 draft pick. So don't forget about that.
USFL, okay, and then he gets cut by the good old Michigan Panthers. So obviously, the state of Michigan does not work out for him. There are speculations that he wasn't the best leader, or he didn't have the best leadership qualities of a really good leader. You
Played a
know,
lot of
and
golf. If you remember
a lot
that that press conference kind of media scrum that
of Gaddis.
Josh Gaddis had, it wasn't great. It was like the opening practices,
Mhm.
and Josh Gaddis had said out of his mouth, "Well, yeah, no, Shea's looking pretty good, and I'm glad, man, because he played a lot of golf this summer." I'm like, why would you say that to the media? That is
Yeah,
an I mean, I never let that go. Drake can attest to it. I never let that go.
yeah.
Like,
Look, we all
what?
like golf. Golf is great. You know,
It's a
it's
great
fun.
game.
But like, hey, man, you gotta. It's new offense, new offensive coordinator. May want to just kind of plug in. But and I think he fits this list. He never quite panned out. Talented kid.
Hmm.
Show flat. Even at Michigan, there were times like, okay, that was a nice throw. Like he has talent. I mean, that was a really good comeback effort by Michigan in the 2018 game, the whiteout at Penn State. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's the game where Ronnie Bell dropped the either tying touchdown or go ahead touchdown in the end zone.
Yep.
And I was thrown by Shea, So I mean, it was a really good game. And like I said, he had flashes, But my next guy, I've seen him actually in the comments, is Chris Hinton. 5-star kid coming out of high school, defensive end, defensive tackle. Father was an all-pro offensive lineman for the Colts. And he never quite panned out. Um, he saw the field, but he was never a game changer, never someone that you had to worry about game planning for. He essentially was just lost in a wash of rotational defensive linemen for this team. Never mentioned in the likes of uh, 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 Aiden Hutchinson or
Heck, even
uh,
Chase Winovich.
Chase Winovich, none of those guys, And I did when I was looking up, Michigan's, recruiting rankings, players. He was like the highest rated defensive lineman I saw on one of them. Like he was legit 5-star kid, and definitely has a bloodline. And it was definitely a disappointment. I mean, he didn't even get drafted. I mean, he's an undrafted free agent, I think, with the Colts, if I'm not mistaken. Which is like, how
That's
underperform you
difficult.
have to not get drafted. I mean, like, my goodness. I mean, wow. But look, hey, I hope he makes the best of his opportunity, but he never panned out at Michigan at all.
Well, I think the fact that I would ask our viewers, does anyone remember a Chris Hinton flash or high moment? Because I don't remember one at all. So the fact that there's almost nothing, like good or bad, like do you remember like a time he missed a sack, or I think the fact that there's none of that, and with how highly recruited he was, I think that, yeah, I think that says enough about about it. Mark, your thoughts?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is Dre mentioned his dad. His dad did have a really good career. He played for a lot of bad teams with the Colts, but do you know what his dad is most famous for? Despite playing in like 5 or 6 Pro Bowls, really good player. What his dad
No.
is most known for is that he was the player that was traded for John Elway when Elway refused to play for the Colts
That's right.
in the
Wow.
Chris
Broncos
Hinton.
Colts swap.
That's
Ooh,
really
that's
unfortunate. Now, I will say this. I will say this, he probably got a lot of flack because, of course, right, the Colts didn't get John Elway, but he was a good player in his own right. So it's probably unfortunate, like I saw he made not only was he a Pro Bowler, he was an All Pro, a couple times. So I mean, he was a really good football player.
it's hard to do.
It's
Being all
hard,
pro is
yeah,
hard to do.
yeah. So that's a great tidbit there, Mark. But it's really unfortunate. Kind of hard to live up to John Elway, especially as the offensive lineman.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Very difficult. I'm debating on who I want to pick next, but I think I'm going to go with him. The Heisman Trophy finalist, if I'm not mistaken. Jabril Peppers is
No,
next on
you
my
did not.
list.
Okay.
I absolutely
Really?
did. Oh yeah, let's
Wow.
get
Okay,
into
this is
it.
gonna get
Let's get
divisive.
into it. So, my biggest thing is number one, Jabril Peppers won Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year his last year at Michigan. Here are Jabril Peppers' stats the year that he won Defensive Player of the Year. He had a grand total of 66 total tackles, 13 TFLs, which is pretty impressive for an outside linebacker, 3 sacks, and 1 interception. 66 tackles in 12 games. There's no way he should have won the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. That is crazy to me. And the thing that I also think about is, people will talk about probably how impressive he was as a kick returner and a punt returner, which I will give you that. But he had 1 return touchdown in his entire career. 1. So
Okay.
hold on. So to me, you can be elite at something, but the stats have to show at least a little bit. His punt return average was 13.1, which is pretty good. That's no slouch, but that's also not elite. And he had 17 returns his sophomore year and 21 his junior year. So you would think with having so few, that's essentially 1 to 2 per game. You would think that he would have a higher average than that. Rushing, people are going to talk about, well, he played 1,000 positions. He had 5 rushing touchdowns in his basically 2 years that he played on the offensive side of the ball. To me, what I would have loved to see from Jabril Peppers was just more impact. He had 1 interception against Ohio State. That's about the only play I ever remember him making against Ohio State. For the top player, I just need more than that. That's not enough. I'll give him some credit that yes, that I think Michigan did him a bit of a disservice by moving him around a lot. I think he should have stuck at one position, whatever it was, whether it's Viper, corner, safety, etc. But yeah, Jabril Peppers is on my list.
Trey, can I catch you off real quick?
Yeah.
I love this one too, just because I've brought this one up in the past where I was like, Defensive Player of the Year in the Big Ten.
That is
what?
Nuts.
So I believe I have faith in all 3 of us intercepting the 1 pass that Jabril Peppers intercepted.
Pass, wasn't it?
It was a tip pass
right in his lap.
Yeah, he didn't have to do anything for that.
He didn't make a play on the ball, but that's his lone career interception. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and 66 tackles, that's total tackles. He had 46 solo.
See, but Des, I gave you your time. I let you. I allowed you to set the table, right? And to see what's on course. And what you're describing to me is not a bust more than it's maybe overhyped, right? So I think it's a lot fair to say that Jabril Peppers was overhyped in terms of his national recognition at Michigan, in terms of being Heisman Trophy finalist and all that. And I think that's valid. I think when you take a step back and you get more and more removed from the season and removed from the hype he had while he was at Michigan, and you look back on it, no, he definitely was overhyped a little bit and shouldn't have been a Heisman Trophy finalist. No doubt about that. And I even would say maybe shouldn't have won Defensive Player of the Year with the Big Ten. But he was a really good football player. And I think that the problem was, almost to your point, is that he never was dominant or great at any one thing. And that's really hard to do. Not everybody's going to be Charles Woodson. They tried to make him the next Charles Woodson. It's so hard, so bad. I remember, there was talk what's he going to wear number 2? That was a big thing. And he definitely had diversified talents. He played running back sometimes, played receiver, he played, returner, safety, corner. He came in as a corner, and then he ended up playing the Viper position, linebacker. They put him almost everywhere besides the line. And he showed flashes everywhere. I mean, he took a return for a touchdown. He got his one pick. He made plays in the backfield. He's a really good tackler. I think he had a couple of good runs, reverses, and stuff like that. Maybe call a pass or two at receiver. I mean, he definitely showed flashes everywhere they put him. But he was never really like dominant, or had, I think what you guys may be alluding to is multiple signature moments, right? Like, okay, it's cool that you got a punt return versus Air Force, but I could have used that versus Ohio State. You know what I'm saying? Those signature moments that in a big game that, like, wow, we needed that. That was huge. That one interception versus Ohio State could be one, but I need more than one. So when I reflect on Peppers, I don't think that he was a bust, but I think that compared to the hype, it's fair to have a conversation. Was he overrated in that context? For sure.
So the only two things I will say is Colin mentioned that it takes time. It took time for teams to game plan against Jabril. I can assure you, Ohio State did not take any additional time game planning for Jabril Peppers. And number two, you mentioned that he's a really good football player. I agree with that. But, I mean, Brad Hawkins had 60 tackles this past season. And I think Brad Hawkins is a really good football player. I don't think he's an elite talent. So Jabril's going to stay on my list. I'm not taking it off.
No, yeah, but and then you can say that, but like I don't think any of us can say that Jabril Peppers wasn't a good player. And like I see some people may be, a little bit defensive, and like once again, this is like hype versus what reality was. And I think Jabril Peppers was a really good football player. I just think that he could have had more of an impact in bigger moments. Based on, like I said, the hype that he had. It was about as high as he can get.
And maybe hype and expectations are synonymous. I don't know. We'll see. But so I think Steve Helwick is going to be joining us, talking a little bit about UConn. But Steve, hopefully you were able to check out just a bit of our talk about our recruiting busts and things like that. And hopefully we can have you hop on and talk a little UConn. And I think that is our Michigan's.
Yeah, Steve may just have issues getting into the stream. So this is a great topic. I love this topic, and I love you guys dicing it up. And Jabril Peppers, yeah, I'll be clear here. I did take a few shots there, but he's definitely the best player that we've mentioned today.
Mm-hmm.
And he was arguably the best player in the country coming out of high school. Like, he was expected to be, and he was an extremely player, and he's making money right now. So yeah, so that's there's no shame in that whatsoever. There was a lot expected of him, and the one thing I'll say about Shea Patterson is the couple oddities there, and you guys touched on it. Is it's one thing to say this dude was amazing in high school and was ranked, this in high school. He played well in the SEC.
Yes.
That should be a sure thing. And if you look at the overall numbers, they're not bad. It wasn't like he was horrible. He just wasn't good in his Des outlined, especially in the big games. And that's what you really need to do in college, especially a player that's playing most of the time against inferior teams and playing on a really good team. You got to look at, okay, what did he do against Notre Dame and Ohio State and Wisconsin and Penn State? Because he's going to pad those numbers, the 3 non-conference games and, half the Big Ten schedule even. But, Shea Patterson has the distinction of being possibly the based on expectations and the position he played, one of the biggest busts in Michigan history. And then you guys just mentioned the biggest bust in the short-term history of the new founded USFL, the number 1 selection.
And
Wow.
I think Shea Patterson was mocked before the 2019 season started as potentially the number 1 pick. He was like mocked as the number 1 draft pick, which is why of the NFL, not the USFL. the
He was,
NFL.
he was getting like, and I remember watching him at Ole Miss. They weren't playing big games like I'm watching him every week, but I'm watching the highlights and I'm watching like a quarter at a time, a few series at a time. And yeah, he was getting all these Russell Wilson, Fran Tarkington comparisons. Like nobody can catch this dude. He's circling around the backfield, making all sorts of crazy plays, and he did. And I'm like, okay, well, that was against an Arkansas defense or a Mississippi State defense, and he's coming to Michigan, so he's going to be pretty good,
right?
And he was pretty good. But when you're the fifth or sixth best quarterback in the conference, that's not going to cut it.
Yeah, not going to cut it at all. Steve, how we doing, man?
We're doing pretty well. Finally got on. Had a little connection issues.
No problem, man. No problem. Thanks for joining us. Know you're a busy man. Dre is below me on my screen. So Dre, Steve, thanks for joining us. And Dre, just to let you know, Steve is a big deal. He is Twitter verified. Just wanted to throw that tidbit out there. But yes, thanks so much for joining us, Steve.
Thanks. No problem. I love being on here again.
Perfect. Well, talk to us about UConn. What can we expect to see in, I think, week 3 or 4 against with the Huskies coming to the big house?
Well, you can expect a Michigan win, as UConn has not beat an FBS team in quite some time. The last non-UMass FBS team that they beat was 2017 against Tulsa. This team's had 10 straight losing seasons. There's not a lot of hope, but there's not a lot of they can't go down any further than what they were last year. Last year they were 1-11, and they went 1-1 against FCS teams. They lost to Holy Cross, but they beat Yale later in the season. And their easiest FBS game last year was against UMass, but they lost 27-13. But the reason for new hope on UConn's campus is the arrival of a new head coach, and that's Jim Mora, who coached UCLA in what I would consider UCLA's glory years of the 21st century, which was back when they had Brett Hundley and Miles Jack and Anthony Barr, and they were getting 10 wins and appearing in Pac-12 championship games every once in a while. So Jim Mora, he had good offenses back at UCLA, as I mentioned, with Hundley and Miles Jack, who would play linebacker and running back, and some of those guys earlier. So I think that's one thing to look forward to if you're UConn. And they got a few transfers this offseason, which could make an immediate impact, including their starting quarterback, although he didn't have the best year. If you remember the Penn State-Iowa game when Sean Clifford got hurt, Taquan Roberson checked into that second half and played quarterback for Penn State. He will be UConn's likely starter this year. So Roberson's going to have a bit to learn from that Iowa experience in that environment, as he's going to be UConn's at quarterback.
Well, I will say this, that we talk all the time on here, what's it going to take for Jim Harbaugh to pull the trigger and possibly make the transition from a good starting quarterback in Cade McNamara to what could be a great starting quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. And now I'm thinking it's finally dawned on me. They're playing UConn, and if Cade McNamara throws one incompletion, I think that's going to be enough to say, you know what, you can't cut it. That's just not acceptable. Yeah, this is a bad football team.
Yeah. And that's just interesting for Jim Mora. I mean, I would imagine with his reputation that I have no idea, but I don't think when he was on one of the shows on a pretty regular basis, I don't think it was clear that he wanted to continue coaching. I guess I say all that to say I would think he would go to a better situation than UConn.
I mean, how did that call go with Jim Mora's agent?
Yes,
like
that was going to be my question.
He calls him, "Hey Jim, hey, look, I know that you've been interested in getting back in the coaching ranks. Look, UConn called. Like, if you're Jim, how do you not just hang up and be like, you know what? Why are you wasting my time with this? How did because last time I checked, I don't think UConn has the deepest pockets to overpay for a coach. So it's like, if you're Jim, it's like, how do you look at that offer sheet and yeah, you know what? This sounds like a great opportunity to get back into coaching football. I just look. when you go 1-11 and you're at the state of UConn's University of Connecticut football, you're pretty much. Wouldn't be shocked if they like have, posters around campus having open walk-on tryouts, trying to find any talent they can, because I'm not trying to like just rag on them, but it's just like it's a really, really sad state of affairs. The biggest, probably exposure they probably have gotten is what was it 2 summers ago when the Aaron Hernandez documentary was out and they brought up his brother playing there, about Aaron Hernandez potentially playing there himself. That's like the last time I really thought, like, even heard about UConn football was like when that came out. Just touching the fact that their family was connected to the program, right? So other than that, you really don't hear much about UConn at all. And like Michigan probably is going to have a better chance of getting better practicing during the week than they will playing that game. Like playing the game is going to be like, okay, like they'll be better off playing a full game versus UConn and then doing an inter-squad scrimmage afterwards, saying like, okay, we didn't get better today at all. So we're going to stay here and we're going to practice against each other.
Yeah, it's a day off. It's a day off. It's like, oh, we don't have practice today. Good, we're playing UConn, but I gotta take off. But there's one thing I want to hear from Steve, and you guys, Des, Dre, you guys know you take the show to whatever point you want. So just I will be in the background shutting it down whenever you need to, but go for 2 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 hours, whatever you want to do. But yeah, to Dre's point, when I heard Jim Mora got the job at UConn, I was like, what? What's he doing? This is the type move, this guy coached in an NFC championship game. Like you mentioned, his days at UCLA. He had a nice little run at UCLA. They could only hope that Chip Kelly would have come anywhere close to matching what Jim Mora did at UCLA. He had a nice tenure there. It wasn't great, but it was strong. And, this is the type career move that a coach usually makes that's got his kind of resume. Like when they're like 70 and they want a job that it doesn't really matter how well they do, but they want to coach still, and they can kick their feet up and be like, I still want to coach, but it doesn't really matter, and I don't need the money, and so whatever they pay me is fine. And I was astounded. So, Steve, do you have any background? Has he made any statements as to
why the heck he took that phone call?
He's feeling philanthropic. He just wants to give back and give back to the game. It has to be something like that.
Maybe he loves the Northeast. I don't know. East Coast.
Maybe. Clearly loves snow, right? Right, Mark? In Connecticut.
You must love the snow. Yeah, got to get back to that snow. I don't know.
Maybe it's an end to ESPN. I don't know. Maybe he's like,
he was already on ESPN.
I mean, I just like when, I'm just in terms of like the selling point, like, they fly Jim in, I hope they flew him in. They fly Jim in and it's like, hey, Jim, welcome. Let's walk you around campus, and it's not like it's like a rich tradition in the back that you can really point to, like, hey, we used to be this, right? So, it's just like I'm trying to think of the selling point.
Maybe Darren Orlovsky was there. I mean,
literally. Like, dude, the last time I have seen a Connecticut football game, it was 2006 or 7 when they played at the Motor City Bowl here in Detroit versus Toledo.
Was it riveting?
It was football. All right, man, I'm sorry, Steve. Please.
Oh, I can still hear. I got to cut in on that one because I got too big for you, Dre. Yeah. Number one, Michigan needed. Steve will remember this, and you should remember this. Michigan needed a last-second field goal to beat UConn in 13 or 14,
Oh,
Steve?
yeah.
Yes.
24-21.
Wasn't it?
It was before Harbaugh. Yeah, it was in the Hoke era. It was, I think, 13 or 14 sounds right.
And then my other one is, let's understand that UConn has reached a Fiesta Bowl in this decade.
2010 Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma, which was the downfall of the Big East, I would say, because that was the game where people realized that the Big East did not deserve an automatic BCS bid anymore. And that basically was the start of the end of the Big East, was that 2010 Fiesta Bowl that featured UConn and Oklahoma. think the final score was like 48-20, but it wasn't even that close if you watched the game.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting hire with Jim Mora agreeing to that. Maybe his family's from Connecticut or something, and it just worked well, and the missus said absolutely, and
Dude,
who
if
knows?
you're
Maybe they didn't
UConn
have to
players,
move.
if
I
you're
was
UConn
breaking up
player-
earlier, but I can tell you the connection that got Jim Mora to UConn, and UConn's defensive coordinator was Lou Spanos, who was their interim head coach last year. He was the defensive coordinator under Jim Mora at UCLA. So Mora's reuniting with Spanos, his former defensive coordinator. So that was the connection. Coaching's all about connections. When you just look at coaching staffs, there's always a connection in there that explains everything about every coaching hire or decision. So that's what really drove Mora to back to Stores.
That's interesting.
It's a challenging job. It's like when you play NCAA 14, you kind of want to start with that one-star team and see how far you can go with them. And
their
make a name
prestige
for
is at
yourself.
1 star. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, coaches like a challenge. I mean, John Gruden had a comfortable job in Monday Night Football, and he was making, I think, $10 million something a year, and he wanted to go back and coach the Raiders, have a high stress job with that. The coaches just are a different breed. They have a different level of competitiveness that they have to get. And you see so many coaches go from the booth, like Bruce Arians, I think, spent 1 year at CBS before going back to the field. I think there's just a certain competitive edge that they have where they have to be coaching at all times. And I think Mora is has that right now when he wants that challenge of rebuilding a UConn program where there's really nothing to lose.
I think his biggest challenge is just like finding ways to stay motivated in the film room after every week. He's just gonna have to find ways, I mean, all jokes aside, like I do commend taking the opportunity, but it's you're literally building a program from the ground up with not a lot of real prestige to kind of lean on, and well, I will say that one thing that can really aid Jim Moore or any coach that really takes a tough opportunity like this is the impact of the transfer portal. Now, because now you can get kids who are flameouts at other programs or are solid to good players, and they just can't find the opportunities at especially the quarterback position, right? Maybe you get a grad transfer. Look, this kid, one guy in mind, I'm just using him as an example. He definitely is. He definitely has foibles. Adrian Martinez. I think about a kid like that, very talented kid. Big experience in college. Played 3-4 years as a starter. And he's in a transfer portal. And maybe you can land a kid like that for your school versus your opponents. He can do very well, right? So I will say that will be something that I'm sure Jim's going to hit hard. It sounds like he already has, and he should probably continue because I think it's a little bit easier now to possibly luck into some good players or hitting gems with the transfer portal than it was in years past to make a quicker impact.
Yeah, they already landed several transfers from Old Dominion who are projected to start. Marquez Bembry, who is a former linebacker at Kentucky, should start alongside Jackson Mitchell and Ian Swenson. That's their most loaded position group is their linebacking core. UConn's offense was atrocious last year. Their defense was pretty bad too and ranks at the bottom of almost every metric, as a 1-11 team should. But UConn's defense did show signs of promise. This team almost beat Wyoming last year. The Wyoming team that beat Kent State in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. That was probably one of the crazier results of the year. Was that? What are you laughing at?
I'm sorry. It was a combination of you saying they almost beat Wyoming. That was the Idaho Potato Bowl. It was a chain reaction just hearing it all in one.
Wyoming was a decent team last year. Xavier Valladay and Sean Chambers. They had a lot of talent in that Wyoming team, and they beat Kent State in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. They had Levi Williams, the quarterback, I think ran for 200 yards in that game alone. But UConn did a pretty good job of stopping that Wyoming offense last year, and they lost at the very end of the game, I think like 24-22. So they showed signs of promise. They put on a few points against Houston and UCF and made those games somewhat competitive. They didn't lose. Like at the beginning of the year, UConn went their first 10 quarters of the season without scoring a single point. And
Jeez.
I think they lost the first game to Fresno State like 48 or 45-0. I remember that was on week 0. I looked at that team and I said, this team doesn't look like they practice football in a year, which they did not play. Remember, they did not play in the 2020 pandemic season.
Yeah.
Right.
So it looked like a team that had not practiced in a while, but it seemed like they made tangible progress at the end of the season where they went from the complete bottom of the barrel to a team that can maybe eke out a win against another poor opponent. At the beginning of the season, it looked like the team was completely hopeless, but they did get that one win over Yale, which FCS wins shouldn't really mean too much, but it was UTEP. You made a bowl game last year. UTEP in 2020, that pandemic season, they were getting FCS wins, and that was progress for them. So anytime you get in a victorious locker room, I think that can build the momentum, and you teach these players how to win. If you look at their schedule next year, I think they play Utah State on week 0. That's a loss. Utah State won the Mountain West last year, incredibly coached team by Blake Anderson. And then week 2, you have an FCS team in Central Connecticut State. That should be a win. If UConn loses that game, they should be humiliated. So they should have a win going into that Michigan game, which I just think can do a lot to boost your confidence. But they're not going to compete with Michigan. They're not going to compete with a lot of teams on their schedule. And they'll probably keep playing multiple FCS teams a year and play UMass every year, and those will be their best chances at getting wins.
So you're saying we don't have to worry about an App State disaster. We're good. We're clear for that.
No, App State, when Michigan played them, I think they were like 2-time reigning FCS champions. And
Yeah.
App State's been even better since getting to the FBS. I still remember that game on Big Ten Network, but no, with UConn, you do not have to worry a thing at all. Like I was on here talking about Hawaii a couple weeks ago, and I don't think you have to worry that much about Hawaii, even with all the changes that have gone there this offseason. And UConn, I think, would probably lose by over 3 touchdowns to that Hawaii team.
Yeah.
Michigan has
an
easy conference this year.
Yeah. Look, trust me. You're preaching to the choir. I mean, I think the Michigan non-conference schedule is a joke. And it's going to help their record look nice and pretty, but in terms of preparing them for the meat of their schedule against the higher quality opponents, I don't think it's going to do them well at all. And what I will say for where UConn is, what I think you really want to see with programs like UConn, Hawaii, especially UConn, it's just fight. You want guys to show good character, to show good fight. If you can't be the most talented team, at least try to make the least mistakes, as penalty-free football as you can. Those are things I think Coach Mora should and will be looking for. How can we just play the cleanest football we can, competitive football, and the rest will kind of play itself out. And that's what I'll be looking for, watching that game. It's like, okay, because to be honest, when Michigan plays opponents like that, it's hard for me to pull a lot out of that in terms of really gauging how good Michigan is, because it's just not a lot of resistance on the opposite side. But for UConn, you want to see certain guys compete and stuff like that, and maybe you can find some hitting gems that, hey, maybe this kid can be an impactful guy for our program. Unfortunately, now I will say is that you almost don't want kids to be too good early in your program because of transfer portal, because then they'll leave, right? I mean, look at Jordan Addison, impact, really good season at Pittsburgh, played with a first-round pick quarterback, and now he's at USC, and Pitt was just in the Peach Bowl, correct?
Yes.
So it's like, that's also very scary for a coach like Jim Mora, because now if you have a good kid, he may leave.
Mm-hmm. You won't want to hang around, especially if you have another 1-11, 2-10 season. It's like, man, if I can play and other schools, potentially want me, or I can go somewhere else, I'm definitely hitting the transfer portal. So it's a very different environment that these coaches have to deal with now. And it's very different because a lot of guys resisted the transfer because they didn't want to sit out a year. And now with it, you having the one-time transfer rule, you have to not only recruit more guys to come in, but you also have to recruit guys who are literally on your roster, enrolled in your school. So it's different, but we'll see what happens with Jim Mora. Have faith in him as a coach. I just wonder if this situation is, I don't want to say insurmountable, but just may take such a long time to rebuild and get there that he may just say, hey, listen, man, this is a lot more than I really wanted to deal with at this point in my career. So we will see what happens.
Here's one thing you want to get out of the Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn games. And I want to use Penn State as an example and UConn's quarterback as an example of this. You need to develop depth, because when you don't develop that depth and you're suddenly getting a ton of injuries like Penn State did in that Iowa game last year, their starting defensive tackle PJ Mustipher went down. They had a couple secondary pieces go down. Their quarterback Sean Clifford went down. And when you're on a game in an environment like that, in a road environment against Iowa, and you're running out of bodies to put on the field, you need guys who have been in that in-game experience, because you cannot, no matter how hard you practice, you cannot replicate just the in-game experience there. I don't care if it's against Colorado State or UConn, that experience is invaluable. So Taquan Roberson, UConn's quarterback, was thrown into that Iowa game last year without too much collegiate experience, and Penn State struggled to even snap the ball to the point where their right guard had to turn around and tell the quarterback when the snap was coming, because the crowd was so loud and the defense was so tenacious, and Penn State was in panic mode in that game. And they blew a 2-touchdown lead to Iowa, and they lost in the second half just because the offense couldn't produce enough to get going. They were basically punting from their own end zone and giving Iowa the ball at the 50-yard line every time. And even with an offense like Iowa's that wasn't really that good last year, they still eventually won just because they had the opportunities for that. So you want to get in these reps. You want to train these backups for this game in these types of games. So when they're needed, because injuries are inevitable in football, you're going to need those guys later in the season. So that is one benefit of having games where you're going to have a lot of garbage time experience against Colorado State, Hawaii, and most definitely UConn.
Yeah, well, Dez doesn't believe in that playing at Iowa is tough. That's the little thing that we have. I really respect playing at Iowa, but
I don't think it should be looked upon as a place that just you cannot win at Iowa. If you're the better team, go in and win. That's my thoughts on it. So that's neither here nor there. But Steve, thanks so much, man, again for joining us. We definitely appreciate it. Dre, always good to see you, my friend. Glad to have you back. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and joining us. And we will be back here next week.
See ya.
All righty. See ya.
Thank you.